Mandy has consistently been one of the most mediocre brawlers in the game, only being around the C to A tier throughout her entire history, never being one of the best brawlers in the game, nor one of the worst. In this video, we'll take a look at Mandy's basics and take a deeper look into her gameplay, and then talk about her history and how she's always been a bit of an overshadowed brawler compared to her sniper counterparts, despite her extremely unique mechanics and her gameplay. Finally, we'll talk about her long-awaited hypercharge, and whether that has brought her into the limelight or not. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only 15% of you are subscribed, so try and get that number up. Mandy was chosen by my channel members, so if you want the chance to choose future PowerPoint brawlers, then consider becoming a channel member for that and other cool perks. Also, if you want a chance to win Pharaoh Ollie, join our Discord server and participate in our gauntlet. Let's start out with Mandy's basics. Mandy is a marksman, but so is every other marksman. Mandy has average stats, with 5600 health and a 720 movement speed, which is normal. Her main attack, however, is far from average. She shoots a long-range projectile that deals 2600 damage at a 9-tile range, with a 1.5 second reload speed. But her main attack really becomes special with her focus mechanic. Her focus mechanic activates only when Mandy stands still for 0.45 seconds, allowing her to have an insane 3 extra tiles of range, for a total of 12 tiles. This makes her have the longest range of any brawler in the game, purely with main attacks. This gives her an advantage over a lot of other sharpshooters, or at least it would if it wasn't for her main weakness of having to stand still to gain this extra advantage. Now, let's talk about Mandy's super. Mandy's super sees her shoot a sugar ray that deals 5000 damage, with an absurd range of 40 tiles. This super sees Mandy lean extra into her ranged theme, having the longest range of literally any attack in the game, unless I'm mistaken. And you can call me out on that in the comments. This super has a few weaknesses for Mandy, as she is completely immobile when charging up her super, which means her super animation can be cancelled with a knockback or a stun, and that means she has to predict enemy movement due to the fact it takes a little bit to charge up her super, letting enemies dodge shots that time. Finally, her super leaves her vulnerable for a few seconds, which means that similar to Nani, she needs to use her super in a safe location or she runs the risk of dying. With the basics out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about Mandy. Her main attack seems like it should be one of the best out of all of the marksmen. It deals a lot of damage comparatively to other marksmen. For example, Belle only deals 2080 damage compared to Mandy's 2600 damage. Because of this, and her ability to get even more range with 12 tiles with her focus ability, she had to get balanced somehow. And she was, in multiple ways. First of all, her projectile speed is underwhelming compared to other marksmen. For example, let's take a look at Belle and Piper. They have a projectile speed of 4000, while Mandy has a projectile speed of 3800. This might not seem like a big difference, but it's more than you think. Or maybe you didn't think that because you are a very smart person. If so, congratulations. Anyway, her slightly lower projectile speed can be often the difference between hitting your enemy and your enemy being able to dodge the shot. This makes her focus shots less useful as well, as you'll see the shot coming from a mile away and will probably have enough time to reliably dodge it. Second, and more importantly, the fact that her focus shot is only activated when she is standing still is a huge weakness to her. Standing still is one of the biggest weaknesses as a whole in the game, as it allows your opponents to easily hit you and charge up their super. This, along with his attack delay, are why Frank isn't the greatest brawler of all time, though he did come pretty close. He stands still when attacking, thereby balancing his absurd health. Since Mandy can have an absurd range, getting to that absurd range is balanced by forcing her to be vulnerable by standing still for a not insignificant amount of time. And especially in the maps she's good in, which are mostly in Bounty and Knockout, which means she's facing other marksmen. And if she's facing someone like Piper, who also has an insane range, the Mandy will find trouble in actually exploiting the range advantage. Because if she stands still for too long, she's going to get comfortably sniped down by Piper. With her main attack out of the way, let's just talk a little bit more about her super. At first glance, it's basically gambling, which to be honest, fits with her counterpart Chester. But it's not actually that reliant on luck. Sure, there's always going to be some element of luck in it, like guessing where the enemy will go, but you can get them down to a bit of a science depending on the map. For example, let's take a look at Out in the Open. This map has a lot of choke points, and choke points are essential for correctly aiming Mandy's super, even when you can't see your enemy. You see, the enemies are forced to go through one of four areas. The jump pad, which is rarely used. The water, which is also quite rare, and you'll know if your enemies can go on water or not. The far right lane, which takes quite long to go through, though at minimum one person probably would go there. And finally, and most importantly, the middle to right lane. You are very likely to see two brawlers go in this lane, and it's a very choked lane. This is a perfect place to aim your Mandy super at, and 9 times out of 10, you'll hit someone. Of course, they'll learn to not go there the next time, so you then move your super to the far right lane and see if you can hit anyone there. And if they wait a while before moving to the middle right lane, it barely matters whether you hit your super or not, as you and your team have gained important control of the map while your enemies are still back. Now, let's talk about her unlockables. First off, let's talk about her gadgets. Her first gadget is Caramelize, which slows down enemies on her next hit for 2.5 seconds. This is a pretty good gadget, and it's her only real defense against aggressive brawlers, and it also allows her to easily hit shots on her enemies. However, you're not guaranteed to hit the shot, so it can easily be wasted. Her second gadget is Cookie Crumbs, which sees her next shot pass through enemies and walls. This is also pretty useful for her, as it can be used as a sort of an assassination tool, taking enemies by surprise who are behind a wall and at low health, and killing them. Now let's talk about her star powers. Her first star power is In My Sights, which sees her attack projectile speed increase by 600 when focused. This is extremely useful for her. As I said earlier, projectile speed was one of her main weaknesses, and this basically removes that, as well as add even more of an incentive to use her focus mechanic. However, it's a little too good because of just how much her projectile speed increases, letting her hit much more shots, much more consistently. Her other star power is Hard Candy, which sees her gain a shield that reduces all damage taken by 40% when focused. This is also quite useful for her, but it often gets overshadowed by her other star power, as the projectile speed increase is just extremely vital for her, even over the shield. With her unlockables out of the way, let's talk a little bit about her history and her balancing. When released, she was nothing special, and in fact, she was quite underpowered, and her focus bar took a very long time to charge up. She was one of the more unique and interesting of the snipers, but compared to someone like Piper or Belle, she just wasn't as usable due to these weaknesses. She did later get her focus bar charge time lowered, and several more buffs like her main attack damage, her Hard Candy star power, was also buffed. These did boost her a bit in the meta, but none of these really made a huge impact on her meta relevance. and she languished in the B tier with a few fluctuations into the A and the C tier. The only things that really seemed to impact her were on the macro scale, like map changes and the performance of other brawlers, such as an aggro meta making her worse and a sniper meta making her better. Supercell tried to make her somewhat relevant with 2 more buffs, this time increasing her super charge rate and increasing her hard candy star power damage reduction yet again. Once again, these were not the biggest issues for her at the time. Her super is a very important part of her, but it's also extremely unreliable and easy to waste, so that didn't help much with her. Buffing her hard candy star power was just not enough, as her other star power basically made her playable and able to hit shots reliably. At this point, Mandy had managed to breach the A tier mostly due to the map pool and the general meta at the time. This time, Supercell finally decided to help her reach even higher heights, increasing both her projectile speed and her super projectile speed, though they did nerf her in my sight star power. This was huge for her, as Supercell had finally addressed her main problem, which was her projectile speed. This immediately turned Mandy into one of the best brawlers in the game, finally coming out of Piper's shadow. However, she was a little too good, and of course, her mediocrity had to be preserved. Supercell nerfed Mandy's attack projectile speed and her in my sights star power once again. To no one's surprise, this ended Mandy's short-lived time at the top of the meta, moving her back down to mediocrity, with the rise of the aggro meta combining to help push her back down, though not too far down. Finally, in the modern day, Mandy has received her most recent balance change, a funny purple button. Mandy's hypercharge sees her shoot 2 additional projectiles, which are angled left and right from her original super. When it was originally announced, most people thought it was a horrendous hypercharge, and basically a copy of Jean's hyper. They thought it would basically change nothing for her and she wouldn't be able to hit enemies due to the tilt on the extra supers. However, this was dead wrong. Mandy's hypercharge ended up being much better than people thought. A lot of people thought that the tilt would be too much, but it wasn't actually that bad. Even with no other factors considered, her stats buff alone were great and definitely helped her compete against the other marksmen who already had hypercharges. However, the extra supers were the main reason the hypercharge is just so good. Let's take Out in the Open for example once again. Before, you would only be able to hit one lane with Mandy's super, and it was mostly based on educated guessing if you would hit your enemies or not. With Mandy's hypercharge, however, this all changed. Now, you could hit all 3 lanes with her super. This could be devastating and basically guarantee a win, or at the very least, a huge advantage for your team. If that wasn't bad enough, consider that hitting 2 enemies with your hyper super gives you back the super, letting you potentially use it multiple times before the hypercharge runs out. For obvious reasons, this is extremely powerful and has great team wiping and jump scaring abilities. If that wasn't bad enough, her damage boost makes the hypercharged super even more deadly, leading to straight kills on many of her direct rivals, such as her fellow marksmen. Finally, it allowed her to absolutely shred someone at close range, where she could hit all 3 of her hyper supers, though this was a little niche. Overall, this hypercharge was incredible for her, and has definitely boosted her out of the shadow of Piper and the other marksmen, leading her to being great in the current meta, despite not having many anti-aggro tools, though she definitely can use a projectile speed increase. Overall, Mandy is one of the most unique and interesting brawlers in the game. Her focus mechanic allows her to have the longest range in the game, but also allows her to be a sitting duck and causes a very risky situation for her. Due to this and other factors like her projectile speed, Mandy has often languished in the mid-tiers of the meta, never being too bad nor too good. However, this changed with the release of her hybrid charge, which was incredible for her, finally putting her into the spotlight. However, one question remains. How long will her time at the top of the meta last? Thanks to Pika for helping me out a bit with the video, and anyway, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.